Welcome to the Winning in Overtime series in the Growing Older with Enthusiasm podcast. And we're getting really close to wrapping up this series. So today we're going to be talking about something that's quite important, uh, to overcome any senses of discouragement, to help people guide the way toward winning in overtime. So, once again, my co-host Neil Haley is here, and I'm ready to go, Neil. Hope you're feeling well and
Yeah,
ready to go.
I am absolutely feeling well. And since we met, it was probably about, I think almost close to almost 2 years ago, when you first came on my show. I remember for a fact, I thought I was winning, preparing to win in overtime, reverse aging. And now I look back at that time. Yes, I was sleeping a little bit more, exercising some, but not dieting properly, not really monitoring my body. Now I could say, after this process, I'm finally doing that. Yoga on a regular basis, sleeping 8 hours a day, figuring out ways of decreasing stress. Because that one, oh my goodness. But it takes time. You need a wake up call when it comes. And monitoring my body, looking at my body, saying, are there any areas that look like they are not going in the right direction that could be really a big problem? One was my gut. And that's when I decided to do lots of intermittent fasting and also OMAD, one meal a day. And doing those tactics have helped in many ways, but there's so many other things, Dr. Ron, you talk about. So this is not okay, an overnight success. That doesn't work that way. So that's what you're going to talk about is getting started, because ultimately it doesn't happen overnight, right, Dr. Ron?
Absolutely. I might compare it to, say, a friend recommends a book that they think is fantastic. And you order the book and it comes and it's, 800 pages thick. I mean, that's really discouraging. It sounds good, maybe on a subject that you know can be helpful to you, but it's overwhelming when you get it all at one time. Now, it's less overwhelming if you think in terms of the fact that you're going to read 10 pages at a time or one chapter at a time, depending how long the chapters are. In other words, you want to be able to have a plan to manage it rather than allowing yourself to become overwhelmed by it. And I know when I speak of the non-negotiable four, the issues of uh, eating healthy, owning your body, maintaining an active level of social involvement and keeping the brain active. I mean, that's a lot to do at one time, unless you're doing three of them already, and then it's just a matter of figuring out how you integrate in the fourth one. But for many people, and I think this is particularly true as people have gotten older, maybe retired, they've devoted their lives to, say, their work, and then they retire and they don't have a plan in place for anything other than work, and uh, in many cases family relationships, uh, but they don't have a plan in place for their own biggest job, which is self-care, because you are a job. If you treat it like a job, then hopefully you're going to go about it in the right way. And that's why they have things like entry-level jobs and more advanced jobs, and somebody becomes a CEO. Ultimately, the goal is to become the CEO of your health and well-being, but it takes some steps to get there.
It definitely takes some steps to get there. It just doesn't happen quickly and fast, and that's the biggest challenge. So how should people start? Like, what's the first thing they should look at and evaluate for themselves?
Well, I think the first thing is to identify an area that makes the most sense for you to start. You want an area that's likely to lead to success and that you can build upon. Again, when we talk about uh, the non-negotiable four, there's probably something that you sense that is either easier for you, you're more motivated, say perhaps to lose weight, uh, or to uh, make friends in your new community, or whatever it may be. Or it may be something where you have a history of success. I mean, there are a lot of former athletes who have gotten out of shape, uh, but their bodies have some muscle memory and they have the ability to exercise a degree of self-discipline. So I think the first thing to do is look at, is there one area among healthy eating, owning your body, and again, owning your body, as we've learned, involves more than just exercise, with sleep, meditation. You know, uh, if there's something where you've had some success in the past, that you were a regular sleeper, or that you had this class in meditation that you really enjoyed, but then it got away from you because you were busy. Find an area that makes the most sense. And if you make changes in that area, if you make steps in the right direction, it will not only make it easier for you to make subsequent steps in that area, but it will also be rewarding to the point that you'll want to uh, do other kinds of things. I know, for example, when I first got to doing yoga, which was part of a kind of a transformation for me in the physical area, uh, I found that I enjoyed eating healthier.
Yeah.
Uh, didn't necessarily plan that out that way, but it just became more rewarding. So yeah, I know it's easier for me to say this, just like it's easier for your friend who's read that 800-page book to recommend it than it is for you to get started. But once you get started, you can really make progress in the right direction.
No, you definitely can make progress and you learn. Like yoga, I would do before strength training the way I use this one type of yoga, Diane and Dallas Page yoga, DDPY yoga, because it's resisting yoga. I really am building a lot of strength, flexibility. I feel like 100, and then help my digestive system. Yoga really helps your digestive system. So even if you're eating some bad foods, at least their digestion is going much better than if you don't. So there's so many different things that you try owning your own body to make it happen, but you just got to start. And I think that's the biggest problem, Dr. Ron, of a habit. Remember, you did that habit summit one time, that a habit takes time to develop, and you have to really be dedicated to that habit.
Yeah, and I think it also takes a particular recognition of the fact that you can wind up sabotaging yourself, not because of negative uh, kind of goal setting, but setting goals that are too ambitious. I know for one, when I try and learn something new, I'm not tremendously patient. I'd like to get this stuff learned, move on to the next thing, and so on. Uh, I'd like to be able to lift more when I start weight training than I do, but I can't go from 0 to 250 without, number one, risking harm to my body, but also getting discouraged. So, and that's a form of self-sabotage, is by setting goals that are too ambitious. Recognize, hey, again, part of what we're talking about in winning in overtime is this is a long game. There might be a couple of overtime periods. There isn't the degree of urgency that we had when you were pretty much guaranteed that if you reach age 70, you're going to either be dead or falling apart. The reality is we now have the ability to go quite a few decades. Uh, some people do the right things and not make it, but you shouldn't be sabotaging yourself in this regard. So, I mean, there really are two lessons. One is no step is too small as long as it's in the right direction. And number two, if as we do with all learning, if you guess wrong, if you take on something that's too ambitious, it only means that you took on something that was too ambitious for where you are at that point. It doesn't mean that, hey, it's either do that or do nothing. It just means let's look at what we can learn from it. What can we back down on? What, is it better to eat dessert 3 times a week or one meal a day? Uh, or is it better to try and eliminate all desserts and then on day 4 or 5 decide I can't do this anymore? So I'm not going to try. So, the mindset has to be one of the fact that I'm not going to sabotage myself. My goals are appropriate. My means of reaching them may not be, they may be too ambitious, but that doesn't say anything about me or my ability to ultimately reach that goal. If they wouldn't need overtime if the team that's winning in the first quarter is going to always win. They wouldn't need overtime if you get a lead in the third inning and then it's impossible for the other team to catch up. The reality is that you use strategies based on where you are and what your goal is.
Mhm. All right. Is there any other tips to offer our listeners and viewers today?
Well, I don't want to give too many tips because that's, kind of counter to what I'm saying. So I think the really important thing to summarize is number one, pick one area to move forward on. As you begin to make progress in that area, you'll find that you'll not just move up in that area, but you will be willing to expand into more of the non-negotiable for, and look to your own history and preferences to see what areas to choose. And then, you know, no step is too small. Some steps are too large, but that only means that that step was too large for you at that point in time, and it just becomes a matter of regrouping rather than doing self-sabotage, because that doesn't work in overtime or early in the game. Some people who would be very good if they had pursued a particular course of action or a particular job, but just didn't give themselves enough time to learn it. Uh, take themselves out of the picture early in their adulthood. You can also do this later in the adulthood, and that's what we want to guard against.
All right. You guys can go check out Dr. Ron Kaiser anywhere. Just search him. You'll find him on YouTube, social media, website, all that. Appreciate it, Dr. Ron. And that was, again, a great Growing Older with Enthusiasm podcast going through the process of winning in overtime. Take care, everybody.